So welcome to the Market Mentors podcast, Catarina.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be here with you.
Absolute pleasure to have you. So before we get stuck into this one, I'd love to know what your relationship is with B2B tech marketing.
Right. So B2B tech marketing, I started working in the tech industry about 7 years ago, which is when I joined Operatix. I had 10 years previous experience in marketing, but always on different areas. So on the agency side, I worked for a media company before, but specifically in B2B tech, it started when I joined Operatix. And I joined Operatix as an SDR. So it's quite an interesting story because there was a big change in my life. I moved from Brazil to the UK and I needed a job where I could either speak Portuguese or German, which are the languages that I was fluent in at the time. I wasn't very fluent in English. And that's how I landed Operatix. So I joined Operatix as an SDR for the German market. And then after 6 months, I transitioned into a marketing role, which is where my passion lies and what I always love doing. So that's how I landed in B2B tech, 7 years ago now. And a lot changed since then in tech. But it's great to see all the different phases that they've gone through and whatever else is still to come.
It feels like it, doesn't it? Yeah, I think a year feels like a long time in B2B tech these days, to be honest, in B2B tech marketing. And it's interesting you made that transition, from SDR into marketing. I mean, some people do make that transition because you tend to find as an SDR, you're kind of earlier on in your career still figuring out what it is you want to do. But actually, it's a tough transition for a lot of people to make because I find, certainly from our perspective, a lot of companies kind of want experienced marketers to come in and do it. So it's great that you got the opportunity to kind of hone your skills at Operatix.
Yeah, no, it was fun, and I did have marketing background before. It just wasn't in tech, but obviously you wouldn't typically get experienced marketers to join an SDR role. So for me, it was kind of the situation in life where I had to kind of take a step back and then take a few forwards. But I think there is a lot of transferable skills between SDRs and marketing. So I'm actually surprised not that many SDRs make it into marketing because I think they typically have the ambition to go into sales. But I'm sure lots of great marketers would have had some sort of SDR, or I'm sure SDRs would make great marketers because you need to understand your ICP, you need to know about messaging, you need to, it's just a different way of pitching, isn't it? Definitely a lot of transferable skills. And I feel like if I had joined Operatix without having been an SDR, there would be a lot of fundamentals maybe missing because having done the job myself and being very close to the customers just massively helped me to really understand what our target audience needs and what their challenges and pain points are. So yeah, definitely an interesting transition.
And particularly with Operatix, because you were probably as an SDR working on lots of different tech companies. So each time you're kind of thinking about the value prop, the audience, tailoring the message. So actually, it's almost like working for speed dating tech companies.
Exactly.
Which one am I working for today? I'm going to tailor my pitch. So, and it is great because, as you well know, and certainly I believe the key to being a good B2B marketer generally is being able to work with sales. So the fact that you've actually, they call it carried the bag, do they, or something like that. But the fact that you've actually been on the other side gives you the ability to empathize with what they have to go through on a day-to-day basis. And an SDR role isn't one of the easiest jobs out there, is it really? So.
Exactly. Once I've done the SDR job, I was like, yeah, I really love marketing. It's so hard. It's not, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's hard because once you crack it, it's kind of rinse and repeat, right? But until you crack it, you just need to be very resilient and deal well with rejection and objection handling. So it's quite a tough job. I mean, obviously there is so many more tougher jobs out there, but it's it just gives you a really good base for any other job that you do because you do have to work hard and be resilient. And there is a lot of things that aren't obvious in a job, like soft skills that you need to develop to become a good SDR. So yeah, it was definitely a great experience.
Fantastic. Well, you are the perfect person to talk about this because we are going to be talking about how marketers can leverage SDRs to drive pipeline. And before we kind of dive into sort of the meat of it, I think it's worth sort of touching on, what an SDR actually does. This will be, probably quite obvious to a lot of our customers, but sometimes there is a bit of discrepancy about what an SDR does and what an AE does and all this sort of stuff. So let's cover that first. From your perspective then, what does an SDR do within a company?
Yeah, so I guess let's just address the acronym because it might not be obvious for everyone, but SDR stands for Sales Development Representative, okay? They have various different names, like some companies will call them BDRs, so Business Development Representatives. Some of them will call them MDRs, so Marketing, or like Lead Development Representatives. So there is all of these acronyms, but I think essentially what it stands for is people that will open doors, right? Like if we keep it very simple, is an SDR typically will engage with a specific set of accounts and people through a multi-touch approach. So they will cold call, they will send emails, they will connect on LinkedIn, they will send voice notes, they will send video notes, they will send GIF, whatever. They will find a way to connect with these initial, with your target accounts and target personas, and set up an initial sales engagement between your company and the company you're targeting, right? So that's a very easy definition. So if we think about the difference of SDRs and AEs, so account executives, the SDR will be opening the doors and the AEs, they will be closing the door. So like they will be closing the deal, right? So SDRs really will be responsible for opening up those initial conversations and building pipeline, essentially, right? Because SDRs typically won't close deals, but they will open up all of those opportunities and build pipeline for companies. And I think from a kind of concept perspective, like the difference about SDRs and BDRs and MDRs and IDRs or whatever you want to call them, it just depends how the company internally defines it. So I know companies sometimes have SDR teams for outbound and then BDR teams for inbound. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes they call them MDRs because they are marketing development representatives, which then are aligned to the marketing team, and then SDRs aligned to the sales team because they do outbound. So whatever works for your company, there isn't right or wrong. I think sometimes we use them as synonyms, and sometimes companies just define them in different ways. So it's a bit like, what is an MQL or what is an SQL? However you define it, right? So there isn't just like one real path that you can go down. But everybody in that sort of profession will be prospecting and getting in touch with companies and people that are relevant for you to target.
Good stuff. And as you mentioned then, and it's probably leading on to my next question, which was kind of how does an SDR fit into the sales team? But generally speaking, then, as you mentioned, and the SDR then is responsible for kind of opening up the account in the first place and qualifying whether or not there's enough of a need there, or they are the right type of business for the company to be talking to in the first place. And then that gets passed to almost like an AE, which is more of a classic salesperson that will be responsible for actually presenting, doing a demo, whatever it might be, and then actually closing the business. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Exactly. So the AEs will take care of the rest of the sales cycle. So if you think of the funnel, right, the SDRs will be at the top of the funnel. So marketing will be right at the top. Then like the SDRs will come a little bit underneath, and then the AEs. And then obviously in the middle, then there might be like pre-sales engineers and whatever, all of these people. But I think from a funnel perspective, marketing is right at the top, SDRs a little bit lower, and then AEs at the bottom.
Gotcha. So it gives them a funnel, I guess, for sales. They can come in, cut their teeth, learn their trade, and then actually develop themselves through that sort of funnel into an AE role, and then into, I know some sort of enterprise software companies will have, salespeople that will go out and present software into big corporates. So that's where the big money comes in. That's why they stay in sales, isn't it? Rather than being in marketing. It's where the big checks get written, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit unfair, Matt, let's be honest.
It is indeed. Well, I have said this before that, with marketing being targeted more on stuff, MQLs, SQLs, and now even revenue, you've got plenty of marketeers who have targets based on revenue itself rather than the lead stuff, which is a transition even further down the sort of funnel. Why not? Why shouldn't?
And it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think I think we had a marketer on our podcast a while ago, and she refers to the marketing function as like back in the days, marketing was the make it pretty marketing, and nowadays we are the making money marketers. So I think we all should position ourselves more into the making money marketers rather than to make it pretty, because really this is how we can prove the value of our category profession. And if you look at SaaS companies, so many out there, sometimes marketing is responsible for sourcing 70-80% of the pipeline, right, and the revenue. So I think there is definitely a shift happening, and with so many companies being more I think buyers being more focused on researching themselves and being more like self-service sort of, when they go on your website and they already know what they want, they know everything about you. When they hop on the sales call, they just want to know the pricing because they know everything else about you, So definitely marketing is playing a super important role in those decision-making processes. But I definitely see a shift of marketing being more valued as well across the board, because the earlier we learn that we are there to make sales easier and, to help drive the revenue, the easier it will be for us to prove the value of our profession.
Yeah, definitely. So how does Operatix structure its SDR team then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess it's interesting for us to do a bit of a distinction here, because Operatix being an outsourced SDR agency, obviously we have over 100 clients that we assign SDRs to them, and they work on behalf of the clients, right? And then we also have our internal SDR team, who is the team that, finds those opportunities within our target accounts. So for us internally, we have the SDRs aligned to the sales team, which is very common to see. And the reason why this is how we do it, one is because the SDRs typically want to become an AE. So from a career perspective, they would rather prefer to report into sales rather than reporting into marketing, because that's kind of the natural career path that they want to go to. And then the other reason why for us the SDRs are assigned to the sales team is because they primarily work on outbound, right? So outbound is more of a sales motion. We do have one of the SDRs that is slightly more closer to the inbound leads. So I have a closer relationship with him because he then follows up on leads that aren't fully mature yet. So that aren't really MQLs, they're just leads. So they have shown some sort of level of intent. So there could be a LinkedIn ad, follow-up, or a webinar or something like that. But we don't really call them MQLs until they actually are qualified by the SDR and then are passed on to the AE. So we have one of the SDRs slightly more aligned with me to work those inbound opportunities. But all of the leads that come through to us from the website, so anybody raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to speak to you, I'm ready, they go straight to the AEs. So we don't do much of well, to be fair, some of the small opportunities go to the SDR so they can qualify further, but the majority of them are already ripe and good to go to the AEs. So that's how we do it. And then from our customers' perspective, it's a mixed bag, really. So we have companies where the SDRs that we assign to their campaigns will be, obviously, they are managed by our team, but then there is a weekly cadence with the client side, right? So sometimes it's aligned to marketing, sometimes it's aligned to sales. So some of the customers, for example, they use our services to drive people to events, for example. That's typically then led by marketing. So then we will have a VP of marketing or a CMO that will be dealing with us for those. And when it's typically more outbound, then it's often the sales team that will be managing the relationship with Operatix. But again, there is very little management that's needed from their side, because we take care of managing the team and ramping up and training and coaching and things like that. But there still needs to be a connection between, especially the rep and the AE, right? Because they work very, very closely together. So they need to be best buddies. Yeah, so we always say the SDRs will do the dirty work that the AEs have done in the past and don't want to do it anymore. So it's really cool. I remember when I was an SDR, I had a really good relationship with my account managers. And that was so important because, obviously it's always harder to get into new accounts, but sometimes they would give us a little bit of insight. It's like, oh, we already spoke to this company. How about you go and try to find other people that you can support in the sales process? So building that relationship was always super important to help get into more opportunities.
Good stuff. And within Operatix, for your own efforts, then you've got a sales leader, I guess. You're on the marketing. You're on the marketing side, the marketing leader. Do you both then report into the CEO then, or is there somebody?
We both report into the CEO. Yeah, correct. Okay. Yeah. So and we work really closely together. That's one thing that there is a lot of talks about sales and marketing alignment, and I always joke with Dan, like it's hard to beat us on sales and marketing alignment because like we work super closely together. Like my targets feed into his targets, and I think we just communicate a lot. We're all working towards the same objective, right? So there really needs to be alignment. That's super important.
Yeah, because you've seen the rise of I know you're a member of Pavilion, aren't you, as well? But I don't know if these sort of discussions come up actually, but in the last sort of few years, you've seen the rise of the CRO, haven't you then? So Chief Revenue Officer, where actually sales and marketing both report into this person, and this person has joint responsibility for both those areas. Typically, I think they tend to come from more sort of sales backgrounds themselves. So they've got the experience of kind of building these SDR and sort of sales teams out, and they understand marketing a bit more. But having that one person that kind of sits across the both functions, I guess, kind of addresses the problem of, or they think addresses the problem of that kind of alignment piece, really. So yeah, definitely. But I think that the alignment piece
has a lot to do around how people are incentivized. So when I started in the role, I had an MQL target, and then after a while, it changed to a revenue target. So I get paid commission on revenue. So like for me, this is super important because I know like marketers often don't get paid commission, or sometimes it's just like a bonus or something. But for me, tying it back to revenue just helps drive the right behavior. I think maybe if I wasn't paid commission, like I would obviously still work super hard, but it just kind of it's a bit of that sales thrill that you get, like a new deal that closed, like go and add it onto your commission check, and I think you get a bit of that thrill that's really, really cool, and also drive the right behavior around the size of the deals you're trying to get, the size of the clients you're trying to get. So yeah, I find it very useful. Some people will say, no, I just want a flat fee, don't give me commission, but it just also gives you a massive opportunity to earn more, because then the harder you work, the more you'll get, right? So
yeah, well, it's that sales mentality, isn't it? But I wonder why do you think companies don't do that more often then? Because we are seeing more marketers being targeted on revenue and having a revenue goal to go after, which makes total sense. MQLs are kind of vanity to a certain degree, but it's very, very rare that we'll speak to a company when we're hiring for them and there is a commission. There might be a bonus based on company profit or based on kind of personal objectives of, do a few campaigns per quarter, etc. But very, very rare that it's actually linked to revenue, i.e. you hit this number and you get X amount of commission. So
yeah, I think obviously because we are a sales organization, a commission is just part of our lingo, right? Like everybody talks about commission, and so I know I'm a bit of an anomaly in this sense. But I think the reason, Matt, why marketers often will push back on that is because sometimes there is a bit of lack of trust in the sales team, and often companies have, there is a bit of a blaming game going on there. It's like, oh, but look at me, I've created all of those MQLs, then the sales team is not converting, so they're not doing a good enough job. But really, you should look at, okay, we created all of those MQLs, the sales team is not closing. What can I do to help throughout the whole funnel? Like it doesn't, I shouldn't just care about the top of the funnel. Why are they not converting? Do we need to create more case studies? Do we need to do better social proof? Do we need to get more clients available to do references? Do we need more reviews on G2 or Clutch or whatever? Like, I think it's about accountability, right? And not just pushing the blame onto whoever is not doing the number. Because when it becomes that blame game, that's where things just crumble, because then you lose trust. So I think there's a big element of that. And to be fair, if
great.
I didn't trust the sales team, I probably wouldn't sign up to that commission plan.
No, no.
So that's why the trust element and the alignment is so important.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So, I mean, if I'm thinking about our audience, generally they go back to that structure where you've got marketing in one team, you've got the SDR team typically reporting into sales, the same sort of structure that you talked about there. So invariably they are kind of working together, but the SDRs don't report into marketing. So there's that kind of setup. But obviously, as you mentioned, then they're crucial to that flow of deals coming through. What sort of tips would you have then for marketers then wanting to get more out of SDRs, or for them to be working together really well?
Yeah, I think you bring there something. One of the challenges we see a lot in those models is the attribution challenge, right? Which, to be fair, we have a little bit of an issue with the attribution there because the SDRs are aligned to sales. When they book a meeting, it's like, for us, it's still like last touch. So it might be that we've been nurturing that client for, I don't know, 3 years with all of the marketing materials and things, and then the SDR goes then converts them. Fair point, absolutely fair to them, right? So we would consider that an outbound. But then sometimes if they respond to like a email marketing or whatever, then this will count into marketing. And still, even though like maybe the SDR was prospecting this person for a long time, and then they just happen to respond to the email and not to the person's call, obviously it's a bit frustrating. So these things happen. So these are challenges that we commonly see. But I think that the best way to address it is look at, what is your motion? Like, how many inbound leads do you get? Is it worth segregating the teams? Like, is it worth having inbound related to marketing and outbound related to sales? Or should it be just one? But that then depends on the volume of leads that you get through, right? And that, again, there isn't right or wrong. There is whatever works best for your company, and you have to test it a little bit. I think we often see a little bit of resistance from SDRs to report into marketing, because they're like, well, the marketers don't know anything about sales, so why do they want to manage me? And I want to get into the sales team, So there is a little bit of resistance on that front. But then also there is a lot of like, I think it's about playing to people's strengths. So one of the SDRs in our team, he's very good with he's very disciplined with updating HubSpot and following the sequences and like following up quickly. And then the other rep is like really good on outbound. So it's like, right, let's just put them in the right place where they should be. So it's playing to people's strength as well. So yeah, I don't know if that responds to your question, Matt.
It does definitely. And how often do you you're talking a lot there on kind of like alignment, aren't you, and metrics and stuff like that. I mean, how often do you tend to meet with the sales team then?
So I join every sales, we have once a week, 1 hour sales call with the whole sales team. And then I join that call. And then I have a weekly call with our VP of sales where we discuss like the campaigns and things like that. And then I have a weekly call with my marketing team, and then one-to-ones with each of the marketing team members. So the marketing team members, they don't join the sales call, but I do. And then, I communicate with what we are doing from a marketing perspective and how we can support them and things like that. And then I also have a one-to-one with my CEO every week, which so every other week, the VP of sales also joins that. So we talk a lot.
Great stuff. And I think off camera, we were talking about kind of, marketing and sales and all this kind of stuff. And you made a great point about marketing, making sales' job easier, really. How involved would you get with that kind of stuff then? I mean, I put a poll out a while ago, actually, about should marketers write the outbound sequences or the cold sequences and stuff like that? Because in many ways, it's a marketer's job. Perhaps salespeople, you would argue, are better at talking. Not, they are good at writing, but generally they are good at talking. Marketers, you might think, well, they're good at crafting a message and, thinking about persuasion and all that kind of stuff. Do you tend to get involved in sort of helping your SDRs from that perspective?
Yes, we do. And so we run a lot of campaigns around trade shows and events. So like those specifically, we would run from a marketing perspective. So what we do is we'll gather the data, we'll write the sequences, we'll segment the data in HubSpot, and we will just assign the contacts to each of the reps. And then all they need to do is to enroll people in the sequences, and then they will do the touch points that aren't email, right? So we do the email, and then they will do the calling and the LinkedIn connection and things like that. So it really is a kind of what it works in tandem, right? But yes, we do take care of the email sequences. I know in some companies it will fall under sales enablement, or especially like companies that have internal SDR teams with an SDR leader. Sometimes it's that SDR manager that will be writing the sequences. It also depends like how personalized you want the sequence to be. So if it's like one-to-one sequence, then obviously we don't get much involved because you need to add a lot of context to those. So we will do more targeted campaigns based on a specific event or a trigger or a certain region or so vertical or persona. So we do like campaigns that are a bit more like, I would say, one-to-few, not the one-to-ones. And also not the one-to-manys, because that's spam, right? We don't do that.
Indeed. Nobody does that.
Nobody does, Matt. Yeah, nobody.
No. What about who oversees them then? Should the marketer oversee them? I'm thinking of kind of lead follow-up and making sure that information's going, because we're talking about more junior people generally with the sort of SDR side. The importance of having good data in the CRM is crucial.
So it's a bit of,
oversee them, or does the sales team oversee them?
It's a bit of a mix on our side. So the sales team will take care of coaching them. So they will give feedback on the messaging, on the objection handling. They will listen to calls. They will give feedback on more of the outreach, kind of the outbound piece. And then we'll do all the support around the reporting and the cadences and the data. So more like the marketing ops side of things. We will take care of that for them. Because again, we need to make it as easy as possible for them. But obviously there is steps that they need to follow and reporting back when they convert a lead and things like that. So officially the SDRs sit on our sales team, but I work very closely with the one that is more inbound focused. So that it's a bit of a joint management on that side. But to be fair, that Dan takes care more of. He's officially their manager, and I just annoy them because they need to update HubSpot.
As you should.
Yes.
And you touched on some of the metrics then. I mean, there are obviously, most companies generally follow the same sorts of metrics, but what do you tend to follow at Operatix then? What sort of metrics do you tend to track?
Right. So everything starts with revenue. Okay. So at, I don't know, in August, September time, the sales team will get their sales target for next year. And then they will break it down by sources. Okay. So we know that roughly 45% from our revenue will come from marketing. Sorry, I'm talking new revenue. Okay. New business. Part of it will come from outbound, and part of it will come from just partners and introductions. Okay. So then let's say we have the number of how much the revenue target is for sales. They then give me the target for marketing, and I need to go and build a plan around that. And then we just work backwards. So I know that our conversion rate from a pipeline to a closed deal is around 48%. So I will go and say, okay, if I need to generate, 5 million of revenue, I need to do 10 million of pipeline. And then I know that from each of the steps, so like we basically just go through the funnel and use our conversion rates. So we work backwards from revenue target up to MQL. And then MQL for us is the right person in the right company that raised their hand and want to speak to us. So an MQL is pretty qualified. So
that's pretty qualified, because I think with some companies that would be an SQL, wouldn't it? If somebody wants to talk to you, is that right? I think with a lot of companies, an MQL is typically I've downloaded a white paper, or maybe I've joined a webinar.
Not for us. Not for us. And I think that's where lots of companies go wrong. So in my reports and trackers, I don't care about leads. Like they don't even make it to my reports. Like all we look at is MQL.
One of those nice little graphs that goes up like this.
I do, yes, I've got all of them, Matt. And we do a lot of analysis around lead sources and the conversion rates per lead sources, and that's something that Chris Walker always talks a lot about, like to having different kind of because it's true. Like you can't just generalize, let's say, an ebook download, which to be fair is is a thing of the past now, isn't it? Like everybody's engaging everything. But anyway, there is still a lot of that. And to be fair, we still do like lead gen forms on LinkedIn campaigns because they work. So we still have a bit of that. But yeah, for us, we do consider the MQL quite obviously. It's not fully qualified because it's not like band qualified, and often some companies come through and we're not really sure if they're a fit or not. So we do need a code to then actually check if it's an MQL or not. But then they will only make MQL status after the code when we then qualified it and realized, yes, there is a chance. So that just makes your funnel clearer and a bit more predictable, because then you know that only the MQL, like we know that MQLs are going to be good. Otherwise, they're not even going to make MQL status.
Yeah, it's a proper lead.
Yeah, it's a proper lead.
Not a
Exactly.
lead.
No.
Well, that's pretty good. Your conversion rates are pretty good there.
I know, telling you about trust and the sales team being good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think, and to be fair, the reason why our conversion rates are really good is one, because yes, the sales team does a really good job, but also because our service is extremely measurable. And, like even like within marketing, there isn't that many things that you can say for sure. You spend this amount of money and you're going to get that much out of it. Like there is very few channels that you can leverage where you say how much you put in and how much you're going to get out. And with SDR services, you just know, right? Because you're literally paying for 10 SQLs or 10, we call them SALs, which is a sales accepted lead, because not always it's fully qualified. So we just set the expectations right with the client, but you know exactly that this is how much you're going to pay. This is how many SALs you're going to get out of it. And then you just do the math of how much you need to hit your pipeline targets,
Interesting.
So yeah.
So you charge your clients per lead then, or actually for the service itself? Or
so we've got two different models. One is a resource allocation model where we will, they basically will pay for the time of the SDR, the management, the data, the technology, all of these things as a set fee per month. But then we set expectations of how many leads that SDR will produce for them. So there is like a ramp up phase. And then after month 4, they will be fully ramped up and then delivering a set amount of meetings per month. And then we also have a model where we take a bit of the risk. So let's say they pay 60% or 70% of the base fee. And then the other 30%, it's based on meeting completion. So if the meeting has been sat within the right account, then they will pay as a bonus, which is very similar to how a salesperson is commissioned.
And I guess would make sense for companies that are a bit more established, because know it's a bit more proven. Whereas if companies are perhaps entering a new market or it's a bit more early stage, there's still a little bit of who is my customer type of thing going.
And often companies come to us because they are trying to figure out what their ICP is. So companies often use SDRs to listen to the market and have that voice of the customer and all right, let's try this message in the financial services sector. If it doesn't stick, let's go and test, I don't know, healthcare. Or so obviously companies, the expectations need to be very different from I need 10 meetings a month. But is that intelligence that you really just get out with one-to-one conversations? So it's a great way to leverage SDRs.
It's a really good point, actually, because I would have thought employing a market research agency is going to cost a huge amount, and you're not going to have that interaction. You're not going to have the ability to be able to be nimble on those conversations to uncover the needs and the objections and all that kind of stuff. So, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. What about tools then, Kat? What sort of tools do you tend to use?
So there is so many tools out there, and I think there is two ways to think about how you're going to use tools, right? I think one is how big is your budget, because then you can go as crazy as you want, but also how many people do you actually have in your team to enable those tools and make them work, and how many tools do you actually need, because there is and I think also tools are getting more sophisticated, where often you can do a lot of things with one vendor and you don't need 3 different vendors to make it integrated, so I think but let's just talk about a basic toolkit for SDR teams. So Sales Navigator, number one. I don't think anybody can do prospecting without Sales Navigator. Then you probably need a good data source. So I don't know, Zoom Info, Apollo, Cognizant, all of these. They have different strengths in different regions, but you need them. And then you need sales sequencing tools, so like Outreach, Sales Loft, all of these. Or companies like Cognizant, Apollo, for example, they have both. They are a data provider plus the sequencing tool. So I think, these would be obviously quite basic elements, and then a CRM system. And then I think that's kind of the basic toolkit. And then after that, you can go into call recording softwares, companies that do like self-dialing, and then you just pick up whenever somebody connects. Video platforms where you can personalize the message, gifting platforms. They are all like nice to haves, I think. But if anybody wants more information about tools, we created the SDR handbook, which is essentially a ebook with 8 different chapters that cover everything you need to know to build and manage your SDR team. And there is a whole chapter about tools where we actually list, like if you were a, entry-level company, what you need, what's the next stage, and what is like the top of the top tech stack that you need to have. But again, just remember, there is no point you implementing a system if you don't have the people that will make it sing and dance, and if you don't have the people that will actually go and follow the process to execute on it. Because for example, there is lots of tools like now AI tools that can automate your outreach and add context to the conversations. You still need to use it. You still need to give them the right input. And you have to find the right balance between automating and personalizing, because it just comes across when it's automated, right? And obviously tools are getting more sophisticated, but you have to find the right balance.
Yeah. And what do you use to monitor your pipeline then for the Operatix stuff that you're doing to try and find new clients then? Do you work off HubSpot dashboards then or something? Or
Yes, we have HubSpot dashboards. HubSpot is our CRM system, and that's where we monitor all the pipeline activities. Obviously, Salesforce is a big one, but we are on HubSpot at the moment.
Good stuff. There are, you're right, so many tools out there. So what if we sort of think about why a company might use these sorts of services? I mean, if you could perhaps take your Operatix hat off for a second. If you're an early stage tech company, then perhaps your seed, whatever, pre-series A, you have a couple of options, don't you? You could outsource your SDR function to somebody like you guys, or you could build an SDR team in-house then. What are your thoughts on this sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I think it all depends of what kind of velocity the company is looking for, right? Because I'll give you a very random example, but let's say you need to go and redo your garden, okay? You want to build some raised beds or whatever. You can go and buy the wood yourself and all the tools and go and do it, right? It's probably going to take you longer because you need to know how to do it, you need to measure everything, or you can go and hire somebody that will go and do it for you, and you're going to have your raised bed. You'll get the same objective, but at different times and different sort of efforts, right? So with hiring an outsourced SDR agency, it's the same. Do you want to go and build your whole team from scratch? So you need to recruit a team where you can match. Well, you can't use you, right, Mike? Can you?
Absolutely.
For SDRs?
Always use us.
Right. Anyway, but you need to hire the team. You need to train them. You need to coach them. You need to give them all of the tools. You need to buy all of the tools and implement it. And you need to manage them, which is more important. And you need to remember that they will leave and they will have issues. And, so you can do that, or you can outsource it where we will take care of all the headaches and all the ramping up and the training and the tools and everything like that. And the velocity typically is quicker because we've done it for over 800 clients over the past 11 years. So there is just a lot more of expertise and intelligence there. So it's quicker. So it depends what you're trying to achieve. And also, some companies think that they have a sales problem, but they actually have a marketing problem. So many times we see companies that come to us and say, we need pipeline, we need more deals, but then their website isn't great, their messaging isn't sorted, they don't know what their ICP is, they don't have a good presence online, and then it's like there is no point in investing in SDRs if you don't have a foundation laid from a marketing perspective. And I think we see that happening so many times. So yes, SDRs can generate pipeline really quickly, but you also need to make sure that they have the right foundation that they're working from. That's why having like a good sales playbook is important, to really kind of boil down the message and make it super simple, because especially with messages that are quite complex and technical, you really need to dive into the benefits rather than the features.
Well, the amount of websites you go to and you read it and go, I have no idea what this company does.
Yeah, so many times.
Those types of companies.
Yeah. And then just kind of adding in, so obviously we were talking about more like early stage companies. I think which yes is a lot of the companies that we support. But then with larger companies, they often have very good inbound motions. So they have a great inbound SDR team, but they lack a little bit on the outbound piece, because obviously outbound tends to be harder because it's more it's colder, right? So often they will supplement their internal team with a company like Operatix to go and do the outbound, or to go into specific markets. So let's say you are an American company and you're expanding into the UK, Germany, and France. So you need people that understand the local, well, the language is one, but also like the culture, the companies and stuff like that. So then outsourcing specific regions becomes very interesting, because then you don't need somebody on the ground, and the playbooks are very different for different regions, right? The way you will pitch in the UK is very different than the way you're going to pitch in Germany and France. So that's another good use case. But like 70% of our customers have internal teams. So often whenever we get in touch, like, oh no, we have our SDR sorted. We've got a team already. It doesn't mean that you don't need an extra support, especially if the team is underperforming, or if you need to, work on specific campaigns, regions, or verticals. So,
yeah. I mean,
sorry, does that respond to your question? I know I was meant to take my Operatix hat off, but I just can't.
You're back into sales mode, Kat. No, it's good. I mean, you're right. There's lots of different use cases, aren't there, depending on what stage the business is at. And like you said, it's not just for small companies that don't have an SDR function. Big companies perhaps entering new markets, new verticals, testing stuff. There's lots of different applications for using a company like that.
For some companies, it makes absolutely no sense to outsource. So because I'll give you an example. So Snowflake, for example, they have a full-on built academy for SDRs, because the SDRs will be their future AEs. So it's a bit like in football, where you have your the younger players that then become So a lot of companies, they see SDRs as an asset to kind of build that talent within the sales team. So in these cases, yes, you need to go and develop your talent, and you've got all your playbooks sorted, and then just go in-house and use that as a way to then build those career paths for the sales team. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of reasons why you shouldn't outsource as well. But just wanted to put it there for a bit of balance.
Good stuff. Where do you tend to sort of go to keep up to date with SDR stuff, SDR developments, all this sort of stuff?
So I think for me, and obviously I'm talking more like from a marketing perspective as well, Pavilion is a great place. We've just recently gone through an acquisition, and I just put a message on the chat on Pavilion asking if somebody was opening to talk about like rebranding and acquisition things. I had literally 10 people messaging me, let's have a chat. So I've got like 8 calls booked in already to speak to people. So that's amazing. Just such a supportive community. I love Pavilion. And then LinkedIn is great as well in terms of thought leadership and content. So there's so much out there. If you follow the right people and you follow their content, there's so much you can learn. And podcast is another good one. We have our own podcast called B2B Revenue Acceleration. So, and the podcast it's all about the guests you bring in to kind of share some insights and like real life examples and information from the trenches, which I think is super important.
Well, it's been fantastic talking to you, Kat. It's really interesting talking to a marketer who works for an SDR business, because you've been there, you've done it yourself. You're working with SDRs, with lots of different tech companies. So you really are experiencing it so much. So to hear your insights as to how to sort of get the best out of SDRs and structure it has been fantastic. So thanks very much for giving up your time.
No worries. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.